David and then Klaus.
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that have been made and perhaps contribute a couple of items to sort of, I share much of what you say, and I think, however, if it's characterized in the way you described it, we may miss some other points. First of all, almost every there's been a Pacific Atlantic debate within American foreign policy since World War II and probably earlier. And even as recently as in 2001, President George W. Bush's first trip was to Mexico. And yet, events in the world keep bringing us back to Europe. And I think we can take some comfort and heart in that. The other thing is, I recall a book that was published back in 1969 called End of the Alliance, A Shift to Coalitions. So we've had debates and we've had dissension and we've had elements of the whole free riding problem, the whole burden sharing problem. I think what is important, to return to the cars, we have a problem with a timing belt. And it picks up Eric's point about the politics of disorder. We also, when there's disorder and crisis, we need to regain that trust. And that trust comes from these interactions. I'm not sure if we need brand new institutions, but we need to become more flexible in those institutions. And there I totally subscribe to what Thomas said, in that even if a country doesn't agree, and in the EU, I don't know of a single EU operation, security operation, where all 25 or 27 participated. So it's a reality that there are coalitions of the willing under the legitimacy of a multilateral institution. And we need to preserve that publicly. And we need to accept that just for national reasons, if there's dissent, doesn't mean opposition. Mm-hmm. And to go with that. Two other quick points. One other point related to that. For those in business, you have a CEO. Do you take basic problems to the CEO? The CEO, or a president, deals with only the most serious problems that can't be solved at a lower level. And I think we need to, I'm trying to infuse a little bit more of the other side without being completely half full here in the glass. But I think we need to maintain some perspective here in that there is constant interaction between the US, between Americans and Europeans. It often is at the sub-presidential level. Yes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The US and Europe work together very closely on sanctions against Iran, on sanctions with Libya, Syria, lockstep in all sorts of areas that aren't high-profile deployment kind of scenarios, but are very important nonetheless. With respect to your point about the diminished attention of European specialists, and I would also argue how many Europeans pursue American studies major or study American government. Because there's more than just the president to deal with. There's also a little thing called Congress that constrains the U.S. And the U.S. is much more federalized in many respects. But the Assistant Secretary for African Affairs works with EU and European counterparts very frequently. Yeah. And so just because someone learns about China as an American, this is an opportunity for them to then interact with a European who learns about China and compare notes and compare perspectives. And I think that has an element that can strengthen and deepen the relationship.
Okay. General and then Eric.
Well, I agree widely with what Thomas had said, and on the other hand, your last words just gave me one more reason to start with what I wanted to say. I think we should keep in mind that we have a strategic level which forces us to stand together. It forces the Americans to remain tied to Europe, and it forces the Europeans. We depend on you. You do not so much depend on us, but to take on your challenge to, I should say, to consolidate your Pacific role, you need a stable Europe in your backyard. And the good old Admiral Mahan is still right, that a global naval power can only survive if it's in control of both coastlines. We Europeans offer one coastline. That's our strategic contribution to the American global role. And we should also take advantage of the challenges we are confronted with. If we were able to live up to our responsibility for the Mediterranean basin and for the Middle East, which is our courtyard and not so much the American courtyard, then we would be a strategic partner. If we did so, we could also help in, I should say, consolidating the path of Russia into, in the very long run, long after I have passed away, in a democracy and in a state in which one day the rule of law will prevail. This could be the European strategic contribution to global security and to a stable partnership. And if we then, Thomas, and there I come to you, if we then stopped what we do right now, to spend 60% of what the Americans spend for defense, but to achieve 15% of the American capabilities. And if we did this, if we changed it by stopping our little national parochial views, we are able, what I said early on, to transfer some national sovereignty to international bodies, be they NATO or the European Union, then we could be a more accountable partner. And that I think could be the one answer to the question. But this requires that all nations are reliable. And I have to pocket my nation's chest, and you know what I mean.
And that's with the trust.
Well, you can't behave like the Germans behaved in this year. It's simply shameful what they did. And this has to change if they want to be a partner in Europe. I think most people in my nations understand it. I gave yesterday a speech in a country yesterday night. That's the reason why I came in so late. In a city which was well known during the Cold War, called Fulda. And when I mentioned there what we did in Libya is exactly the opposite of what we expected our allies to do during the days of the Cold War. They all agreed, and I think they are willing to share responsibility and burdens. And this brings me to one point you mentioned as well. I think we should not throw away values so quickly. I'm saying this from based on the simple thinking of military people. Military people do not fight for something which is abstract. They have to have something where you can put your fingers on, be it a flag or be it the idea of defending your nation. You cannot send people into the risk for their life without a deeply ingrained conviction. And some of our common ideas, which are expressed behind the flags of our nations, behind the flag of the European Union, behind the flag of NATO, these are the elements which keep us together. It's a part of the clue. And we should not so quickly throw it away.